Hi, I'm Ron Hazelton, National Spokesperson for the Home Fire Sprinkler Coalition. As the Home Improvement Editor for Good Morning America, I can tell you firsthand that I know how devastating home fires can be. And I also know how quickly home fire sprinklers can control and in most cases extinguish a home fire. That's why when my wife and I bought this 35-year-old Colonial, we retrofitted it with home fire sprinklers, both to protect our property, but more importantly, to protect our children. In the next few minutes, I'd like to show you how we planned, designed, and installed our home fire sprinkler system.
A retrofit project with any occupied building or with the homeowners, I think the most important thing is having good open communication with the homeowners and to describe to them exactly what you're going to be doing and where you're going to be working.
Well, come on in, David. This is our new house, about 30 years old. We spent a lot of time over the last few weeks painting in here, doing wall prep. One of the things I'm really concerned about is how much damage we're going to have to do to these walls and ceilings now after we've done all this work.
Well, it won't be too bad. We'll have to open a few wall sections up and we can utilize some of the closets to conceal the piping.
All right. So there are ways in an older home like this to keep from having to open up too much.
Definitely.
Wall and ceiling area. All right, let me show you around, give you kind of the lay of the land here. Does a bathroom require sprinklers?
Well, most bathrooms don't, but a bathroom this size you would have to.
Really? Okay. So this is small enough so it won't need a sprinkler in here?
Yeah, you wouldn't need one.
Okay. Let me show you the third floor here. Now this part of the attic is unfinished except for this plywood flooring down here. Is that going to be a problem for you?
Now, Ron, we'll just cut it up in strips what we need to and we can lay it back down afterwards.
Right back? Okay, great. So this area concerns me a lot. If there were a fire, this would fill up with smoke pretty fast. I wouldn't want to be cut off from my daughter's room down there. Well, this is the dining room, and then finally out here is the kitchen. So David, you've seen pretty much the whole house now. Any problems, challenges?
Well, the biggest challenge is going to be on your first floor. There's not a lot of closets to use to conceal piping, so that means we're going to have to try to open up some wall sections to hide the piping.
A lot of it?
Well, that's where the planning is going to come in, and we'll have to get some scale drawings for you and try to minimize the number of openings. Doing any kind of residential retrofit, the key points is to think about in your planning the aesthetics of how the sprinkler system is going to look to the homeowner. You want to make sure you can conceal as much piping as possible and be least obtrusive as possible. I say thinking outside of the box in terms of where you would actually put the piping and being creative and finding spots and utilizing closets if possible. Look at the house to see where people have visual contact when they walk into rooms. If they're walking into a living room, you want to avoid keeping piping or things on the opposite side of the living room where they're going to see it right away. You might want to leave it on the side where you'd walk in. But you could look for areas where you can go into wall channels and try to get the most bang for your buck. If you could use a wall channel and actually pipe 2 or 3 sprinkler heads from it, that's great because then you've created the least amount of demolition and reconstruction work in the future. When you're doing a retrofit with the homeowners, one of the things you want to do is make it clear to them what you have to do. And that's also going to come in the form of your actual blueprints where you show them where your piping is going. And then you want to talk with the homeowners about their schedules, find out what their daily schedules are like so that you could be working in opposite ends of the home where they are so that you're not disrupting their daily life. And you know, occasionally there may be some things, furniture or things they have to move, and you can tell them what has to be done. You don't want to have the homeowner clearing out his entire house just because you're there working in the living room. It may just be in the living room they may have to move a few things when they're working or if they want to protect some items.
So these plans have the location of every run of pipe and every sprinkler for the entire house, right?
Yep, the whole house.
This is the basement. This is the first floor. Here's the kitchen. Now, where are the sprinklers going to go in here?
Well, for example, in the kitchen, in fact, we have one going in right here above the cabinet.
Right up
We
here?
have a horizontal sidewall about 6 inches below the
You
ceiling.
know, something I didn't tell you the other day when you were here. I think I'm going to take this out, and I'm going to be building a pantry in here, which is going to stick out probably this far. It might go up to the ceiling. Is that going to be a problem for you?
Yes, that will be a problem. We're going to have to look into another possible location for putting that sprinkler head in the kitchen.
So part of your process is to bring the plans back, go over them with the homeowner, looking for stuff just like this that you did pick up
Yeah,
on the first survey,
exactly,
right?
yep.
Okay.
The first thing we had to do was look at the water supply to the house.
So you're going to be tapping into the household water system, right?
I hope so.
And where will you actually do that?
Well, we would do that right close by where it comes in, if the pressure's adequate.
Right here?
Yeah. I got a little gauge, we'll check.
So I've got city water here, obviously.
Yeah.
So what would you like to see here?
I'd love to see 100 PSI. Then I know we'd be safe. Checking the pressure, we were looking at about 35 to 40 pounds of pressure. So the pressure looked rather low. Also then in contact with the water authorities, we weren't going to be allowed to tie into the existing water line. We would actually have to bring in another water line from the street. So at that point, we looked at the alternative of providing a tank and a pump.
So that's what this is all about over here.
Yeah, we have a 300-gallon plastic water storage tank and an electric booster pump.
So together, the storage tank and the pump will provide enough flow and pressure to operate the system.
For 10 minutes.
Well, I was going to put my pool table right here, but what are you going to do?
Well, we'll see about tucking it all out of the way for you.
So we can have both.
Right. The water storage tank is a 300-gallon water storage tank, and we have it set up with just a manual fill valve, and we basically keep the tank filled up to the 300 gallons. And the 300 gallons is adequate for the amount of water you would need. It would provide a 10-minute supply to your system. The water supply from there's a feed line, a supply line that goes to the booster pump. And the sprinkler system actually has water, it's fully pressurized. And the pump will only operate if there's a drop of pressure. So if a sprinkler head activates, the pressure is going to drop in the system, causing the pump to start running. And that pump will run, and it'll keep running until that tank is dry. But that's your 10-minute supply and enough time for occupants to get out of the house.
The pipe specified for home fire sprinkler systems is plastic, CPVC, or chlorinated polyvinyl chloride. It's similar to PVC water pipe, but more heat resistant and less likely to melt. It's joined using a pipe cement. Because the ceilings are low here in the basement, we're installing cages to protect the sprinkler heads from being accidentally bumped. With the basement complete, the work moves up to the first floor. Here, of course, the pipes must be concealed behind the walls, and that means removing sections of wallboard to expose the bays between the studs.
That was probably the most difficult part because we don't necessarily always know what we're going to run into when we open up the walls, whether it be wires or even ducts that could be in the walls. It's light work. The contractor doing any kind of residential fire sprinkler work has to have the tools to do what has to be done in a clean manner, and that would be in drop cloths, plastic, a good vacuum, and having some tools that a lot of times woodworkers would use, a nail gun, utilizing like a rotozip for cutting sheetrock, a good wood boring tools, those types of things where you can do clean cuts. So a lot of the tools you'd have would be tools that are not common in the sprinkler fitter's toolbox, but tools that make the job easier, particularly when you're working in wood construction.
Holding a vacuum nozzle close to the rotary cutting tool cuts down on the dust. Next, a hole is drilled through the bottom of the wall and into the basement below. A section of pipe is cut to length, cemented to a right angle fitting, then the entire assembly is passed through the hole where it will be connected to the basement sprinkler line. Here on the first floor, the pipe is extended section by section up the wall and horizontally through the wall studs where necessary.
On the first floor, we utilize the horizontal sidewall sprinklers, and the reason being is that in order to use, say, a different type, the type in the ceiling, we would have had to go up into the ceiling joists and open up the ceilings. So this becomes a much quicker and easier way to still provide sprinkler protection. Yeah. Then we located a couple spots where we could run piping up to the second floor and actually through the second floor into the attic. And at that point we were looking for closets to utilize. And the closets being a space where we could hide the piping running up through and not have to open up any walls on the second floor to get to the attic space. We found one closet in one of the bedrooms, and that provided us a perfect avenue to get up to the attic.
This power crimping tool squeezes the joints together, making a permanent watertight seal. The final section of metal pipe is passed through the ceiling and into the attic. Here, the pipe is run horizontally above the bedroom ceilings.
Once we got out into the attic, we had some floorboards that we had to deal with, but it was attic flooring, and it was something that we could cut channels out and actually reinstall some of the attic floorboards once we were completed. So you almost didn't even know we were there at the end. But in the attic allows us to do a lot of our piping. Even if we have to expose it, we know we're going to insulate it later on. And that allows us to pipe all the heads down to the second floor ceiling. Generally speaking, if we're running sprinkler piping, we usually have to go above the joist, because usually with joists spaced 16 inches on center, it becomes difficult to start drilling multiple joists and then trying to feed any kind of length of pipe through that joist itself. So. What we try to do, if we can get into joist channels where we're running parallel, we can leave the piping below the actual floorboards. In some cases, we have to have the piping above the joist. It could be, you could build like a raised platform over it. That way you'd still have concealed piping. But in some parts of the attic that we installed the piping, it was space that was obviously used for mechanical space with other ductwork and was never going to be concealed.
Thread sealant is applied to the sprinkler heads, and they're screwed in. Finally, a cap is installed to conceal the recessed sprinkler from view.
Insulation that we put over the piping in the attic is to create a pocket for basically the heat to be trapped between the second floor ceiling and the insulation. And what we do where we have to leave the insulation exposed, we'll put like a poultry netting, or sometimes they call it chicken wire, over that insulation and seal it down. And that just is kind of a little insurance policy to make sure someone doesn't kick the insulation over, or say a contractor comes in later and has to install a light and moves the insulation and forgets to put it back there. just kind of sends a message that the insulation's there for a purpose.
Once the system is leak tested, it's pressurized and ready to go. If there is a fire, the nearest sprinkler will activate. In most cases, only one sprinkler will go off.
Routine maintenance for a wet pipe sprinkler system with a tank and a pump would be annually to do a test, and I'll say it'd be a flow test, and basically going to the inspector's test and actually operating the inspector's test valve, and that simulates a sprinkler head opening. At that point in time, what it'll do is it'll start the pump up, start moving some water through the piping, activate your flow alarm switch. At that point, you see your pump's running. Close down the valve, the pump should shut off on its own, and then after that you can top off the tank and you'll be ready for next time. The other thing you may want to do is, particularly, is walk around through the whole house, just check on all the piping, see that nothing has changed in the house of any kind of construction or anything has changed with the protection or coverage, and then particularly check up in the attic to make sure the piping and the insulation are still in place.
Now this is really ingenious. Hiding the pipe behind the cornice or crown molding. I never would have thought of that.
Yeah, we took advantage of the architectural feature of the molding. It prevented us from having to cut open the sheetrock and drill through the studs. We were able to tuck the pipe in up above.
Now this is the kind of thing that I could see you might want to even suggest to a homeowner. It's a nice embellishment to the room, and it makes the installation a lot easier.
Yeah, it's a great alternative for concealing piping.
Now this is that pantry I put in. Remember I had a wall cabinet up here and a base cabinet, took that out, put this in, and you pointed out to me that that was going to be a problem because you'd planned to put a sprinkler right there.
Right there. So what we did, Ron, is we came over here and we installed a horizontal sidewall sprinkler head. This is covering half of the kitchen, and then on the opposite end of the kitchen we installed another horizontal sidewall.
So these two together take care of the whole space here.
Yep.
So this is a good example of you knowing beforehand if there are going to be any changes in the house. Because if I hadn't told you that, that sprinkler would have been useless up there.
Right. We would have been in trouble.
Big trouble?
Well, this is one of our challenging openings here. We had to open this
yeah.
bay here. We had electrical wires, security wires, and we were able to pipe 2 sprinkler heads, and look how nice it came out.
You know, you'd never know you guys were here. And when I saw this opened up, this was probably as big a hole as we had to do on this first floor. Turned out great. Now, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong here, this is a good example where planning pays off in great efficiency because the pipe comes up here, crosses over, and supplies this sprinkler head in the hallway. But that same pipe also supplies this sprinkler on the other side of the wall for the dining room. So we didn't have to really even open up a wall in the dining room.
Right. This came out really well because aesthetically it looks great too because it's centered between both spaces. We came up where there is no wall and we routed around and got 2 sprinkler heads.
So I guess you could say this is an example of where 2 heads are better than 1.
Perfect.
Now I have 1 or more sprinklers standing guard in every room of my home. The concealed heads, like this one, will remain out of sight unless there's a fire. In that case, when the heat at the ceiling reaches about 150 degrees, the cover would drop away and the sprinkler would activate. Typically, within a minute or so, the fire would be out. Sprinklers like mine would discharge about 25 gallons of water per minute if they were activated. Firefighters' hoses, on the other hand, put out about 250 gallons per minute, 10 times as much. This is the kind of destruction a fire can cause in just minutes. And this is a typical example of how little damage can occur with sprinklers.
A lot of times contractors will look at a retrofit project as being a very difficult project and challenging. And I will say they are difficult and challenging, but they're no more challenging than new construction. And I'd really encourage people to think about doing retrofit work.
You know, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that having a home fire sprinkler system is like having a firefighter in every room of your house 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I know that's what I want when it comes to protecting what I value most.
you guys.